My friend's dad needed a caregiver, so this is a true story sent by one of our subscribers and edited by me to share with you all. To keep everyone safe and their names secret, I changed the names and some details, but the main part of this story is totally true. If you like the video, don't forget to like and leave a comment. I'll do my best to answer everyone. So, here we go. I'm Ashley, 23 years old, a nursing student, dealing with the tough routine of shifts, tests, and internships. Anyone who's been through this knows, it's a never-ending rush. I finally got my own place and live alone. A dream that came with a lot of saving and some fears along the way. Oh, and before you ask, yes, people say I'm pretty. I take good care of myself. It all started on a normal day. During a break, scrolling through social media, I got an unexpected message from my friend. And that's where it all began. Her friend Jessica spoke quickly, getting straight to the point, explaining that she needed someone trustworthy to take care of her father, who had just had surgery. It was an extra job that could help cover some bills for the month, and being a nursing student, Ashley already had some experience with basic care. But accepting meant more than a financial opportunity. There was something there that sparked a different interest, a curiosity she couldn't quite name yet. Mr. William, retired and cheerful, didn't seem like the typical patient she expected to find. Unlike other elderly people she'd seen during her internship, he had a sparkle in his eyes, a witty way about him that made her smile right from their first conversation. With his daughter busy between work and school, he needed someone to help him with daily tasks. Nothing too complicated. Just company, help with his medications, and a watchful presence to prevent any accidents. It was a hot day when Ashley arrived for her first visit. The house had a cozy feel, one of those homes that hold stories in every piece of furniture and photographs scattered around. As she walked through the door, she felt a mix of anticipation and lightness, as if she were entering a familiar scene, even though she had never been there before. Jessica greeted her with a grateful smile, leading her to the living room, where Mr. William was already waiting for her, with a curious look and a joke ready. Ashley soon realized that the routine wouldn't be boring. Mr. William talked about everything, old movies, trips he took when he was younger, and even the modern challenges of social life for senior citizens. He gestured enthusiastically, making every conversation a new discovery. And suddenly, that simple offer of extra work seemed to be turning into something bigger, something she couldn't quite define yet. The job seemed simple at first glance, but Ashley soon realized it was more than just an extra job. Adjusting her routine to balance nursing school with caring for Mr. William would require some flexibility. Also, being in the home of someone she barely knew gave her a strange feeling. Not exactly uncomfortable, but something undefined, like she was entering a place that held more than just old furniture and family memories. The money would help a lot. College expenses were relentless, and any extra income was welcome. But besides the financial side, there was also the challenge of dealing with a new dynamic. William wasn't a frail or weak patient. On the contrary, he seemed to maintain an unexpected independence for someone who needed a caregiver. This kept her on alert. What exactly did he expect from her besides basic care? As the days went by, Ashley noticed that he liked to test her limits, whether with unusual questions or with good-humored comments that caught her off guard. Nothing offensive, but enough to make her realize that he was different from the other retired men she had dealt with. He had a sharp wit, a youthful energy that contrasted with the image she had formed before meeting him. And this impression only grew. With each visit, the professional barrier seemed thinner. Mr. William was polite, friendly, and above all, he liked to talk. And Ashley, who at first only thought about the payment at the end of the month, began to feel that the job offered something more. A new experience, a different kind of connection. Days went by, and Ashley was already used to the light routine, but full of thought-provoking conversations with William. He always seemed to be in a good mood, but from time to time, he would grab his phone and walk away, chuckling softly, exchanging messages with someone. At first, she didn't pay much attention. After all, everyone has friends. But little by little, she noticed that those conversations were frequent and always had a different tone, almost conspiratorial. Who was on the other end of the line? One afternoon, while organizing some medications in the kitchen, she heard William on the phone in the living room. His voice was lower, with a different intonation than the one he used with her. "William, oh my dear, you spoil me like this." Ashley held her breath for a moment, pretending she didn't hear. The image she had of William began to change. He wasn't just a retired gentleman, he was a man who still lived life to the fullest. Throughout the days, the phone calls continued. Between jokes and subtle hints, William let slip a piece of his social life, something Ashley would never have imagined before meeting him. At one point, he noticed her attentive gaze and smiled slightly. "Youth doesn't have a monopoly on fun, Ashley," he joked, winking at her. The comment caught her off guard, awakening an unexpected curiosity. The idea that William had an active love life was something Ashley hadn't considered. He wasn't like the other older men she had cared for. He had a different energy, a confidence that made her see him in a different light. But for now, it was just an impression, a question in her mind. It was an ordinary morning, or at least it should have been. Ashley arrived early, as always, and was surprised to notice the door slightly open. William never left anything unlocked. With a light touch, she pushed the cold wood and called his name, but silence was her only answer. A strange feeling ran down her spine. Taking a deep breath, she took a few hesitant steps down the hallway until her eyes caught something that made her freeze. There, on the living room sofa, William slept peacefully, his expression serene. But he wasn't alone. Next to him, nestled under a light sheet, a young woman rested with her face partially visible. Her brown hair fell over her bare shoulders. Her delicate features and slender body seemed strangely familiar. Ashley felt her stomach churn as she realized why. The girl looked strikingly like her. Her heart raced, and heat rose up her neck. Was this a coincidence? What did it mean? Her eyes scanned the scene, picking up details that made her even more disconcerted. The soft curves, the fair skin, the way her body fit against his. Everything seemed to echo a version of herself. An uncomfortable thought formed in her mind, but she pushed it away too quickly to process it. Swallowing hard, Ashley carefully stepped back, struggling to regain control. Her mind screamed at her to move on as if nothing had happened, but something inside her had already changed. The image was etched in her mind, impossible to ignore. Something told her that this discovery would not leave her thoughts anytime soon, and that one way or another, it would make her see William in a different light. Ashley's stomach churned, as if she had intruded on something she shouldn't have. Her first instinct was to retreat slowly and silently, so as not to be noticed. She took subtle steps back, keeping her eyes fixed on the scene in front of her, until she hid in the hallway. Her heart was still pounding, and her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. It was uncomfortable, but a part of her couldn't ignore the detail that bothered her most. The girl's resemblance to her. Standing there, she took a deep breath and then made a decision. If William and his companion were so comfortable, they should wake up and deal with it. She walked to the kitchen and started opening drawers, handling utensils and placing objects on the table with a little more force than necessary. The silence of the house was soon broken by metallic sounds and small impacts echoing through the rooms. A glass was placed firmly on the sink, followed by the purposeful clatter of cutlery. The answer came quickly. A sleepy murmur, the sound of rustling fabrics, a lingering sigh. In a few seconds, footsteps shuffled across the floor and, turning around, Ashley saw William leaving the room, his hair messy and a slight smile on the corner of his lips. Behind him, the young woman quickly adjusted her clothes, visibly uncomfortable, not knowing where to put her hands. Unlike her, William seemed relaxed, or even amused by the situation. Ashley said nothing. She simply continued organizing the medicines on the table without expressing any obvious reaction. But inside, she knew that the scene would not leave her mind anytime soon, and that somehow it would change the way she saw William from then on. On another occasion, the rain was relentlessly pounding the city. Ashley arrived at William's house completely soaked, her hair clinging to her skin and her body shivering with the biting cold. As soon as he opened the door, his expression changed. This time, there were no jokes, only concern. "Come in quickly, you'll get sick like this," he said, pulling her inside and closing the door behind her. Without delay, he went to find some dry clothes that, according to him, belonged to his daughter. When he returned, he brought incredibly short shorts and a thin t-shirt that revealed more than it covered. Ashley hesitated as she stared at the clothes, frowning. "It's all I have here," William explained, insisting that she accept them. The icy cold on her skin convinced her that she had no choice. She took the clothes and went to the bathroom, feeling a growing discomfort as she undressed and put on the provocative clothes. The mirror reflected her shame. The shorts barely covered her thighs, and the shirt, loose and thin, left her body even more exposed than she expected. But the worst was the cold. With her skin covered in goosebumps, her breasts were clearly visible through the light fabric. Ashley crossed her arms over her chest in a futile attempt to hide, feeling her face flush with embarrassment. She took a deep breath before going out, hoping that William wouldn't notice how much it bothered her. As soon as she appeared in the room, he looked up and for a brief moment remained silent. William's gaze traveled over her body from top to bottom, slowly, pausing for a second longer on the thin fabric that molded her curves. Ashley felt every exposed part of herself burn under that gaze and turned her face away, trying to act normal. But something had changed, and she knew that no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, that feeling wouldn't disappear anytime soon. As the days passed, Ashley began to notice small changes in William's behavior. At first, she thought it was all in her head. Maybe she was just paying more attention to the way he spoke, how he watched her when he thought she wasn't noticing. But the lingering looks, the smiles filled with something more, started to become frequent. It wasn't just kindness or gratitude for her work as a caregiver. There was a silent tension in the air, something that settled between them when they were alone. She tried to ignore it, but her own body reacted. When he came close to grab something in the kitchen, when their hands brushed accidentally, a shiver ran down her spine. William never crossed any lines, but his gestures were different now. A light touch on her back when passing by, a joke told in a lower, almost intimate tone. Ashley wondered if he did it intentionally, or if it was just a misinterpretation on her part. However, the doubt dissipated in the moments when he watched her from afar. Once, while changing the bed sheets, she felt his gaze on her, analyzing every move. When she turned her face, he didn't look away, holding eye contact with an intensity that made her heart race. She didn't know whether to say something or just pretend nothing was happening. But in that moment, one thing became clear. Something between them was changing, and there was no going back. Every little detail began to carry more weight. The timbre of William's voice, the way he smiled at her differently, as if there was a shared secret there. Ashley tried to convince herself that it was all an illusion created by their daily interaction. But deep down, she felt like she was fooling herself, because with each passing day, the simple fact of being next to him awakened an anticipation she didn't want to admit. All day, William devoured her with his eyes. At first, it made Ashley uncomfortable, made her feel exposed, vulnerable. But over time, the uncomfortable feeling gave way to something different, an unexpected warmth, an excitement she didn't want to admit. Each prolonged look from him ignited something in her, a silent desire that intensified as the hours passed. And when she realized this, something changed inside her. Without thinking too much, she began to subtly provoke him. Calculated movements, but disguised as innocence. She would bend down to pick something up from the floor, knowing that his eyes followed every curve of her body. She ran her hands through her hair, arched her back slightly when stretching to reach something up high. Small gestures that made her feel the power of that silent game. And William, even without saying anything, didn't hide his fascination. When the day ended, Ashley went home still feeling the electricity of that atmosphere between them. But as she lay down, the guilt weighed heavily. This was wrong. He was her friend's father, an older man, someone who trusted her to take care of him. She scolded herself mentally and promised that she would forget everything, that she wouldn't let that happen again. She closed her eyes, determined to move on without looking back. But as the days passed, this forbidden desire didn't disappear. On the contrary, it grew, becoming a persistent thought. The subtle provocations continued, as did William's intense gazes. And more, Ashley wondered how far this could go. The game between them intensified. With each passing day, William's looks became more blatant, and Ashley no longer bothered to hide her provocations. A subtle touch when handing something over, a smile that lasted a second longer than necessary, the way she crossed her legs slowly when she sat across from him. The tension between them was palpable, a spark about to set everything around them on fire. One night after a long day at work, Ashley was saying goodbye at the door when she felt William's fingers lightly brush against her arm. It was a simple touch, but loaded with meaning. She looked up, meeting his eyes fixed on hers, and the silence that fell between them spoke more than any words. The air grew heavy, dense, as if time itself had stopped just for that moment to happen. Her heart was pounding, and she didn't know whether to pull away or surrender to what already seemed inevitable. But it was William who took the first step, subtle but definite. With an almost imperceptible gesture, his fingers slid gently along her forearm, tracing a slow path to her hand. Ashley felt her breath hitch, her whole body awaken with that touch. Instinctively, she lowered her eyes, and that's when she realized.
The tension between them wasn't just in the air, it was written all over his body. The evident bulge in the front of William's pants made her stomach twist in a mix of surprise and excitement. She felt her face heat up, her entire body reacting to that detail that was now impossible to ignore. What had once been a silent game of teasing had crossed any imaginable limit. Ashley should step back, pretend she hadn't seen it, end it right there. But for a brief second, she remained still, feeling the weight of desire in the air before taking a step back and murmuring a rushed goodbye. She left without looking back, but with one undeniable certainty in her mind: this wouldn't end here. The following days were a real test for Ashley. She tried to act normally, but every time her eyes met William's, an electric current ran through her body. The tension between them grew more intense, as if an invisible barrier was about to collapse. The way he looked at her, how his presence felt closer than before, everything indicated that the line between the allowed and the forbidden no longer existed. That night, something changed. Ashley was helping William up from the couch when she felt his hands firmly gripping her waist, holding on just a second longer than necessary. A shiver ran down her spine, and when she looked at him, she found his gaze filled with desire. Ashley didn't back away. Her body remained there, too close, too warm, loaded with something that could no longer be ignored. William understood the message instantly. With a firm movement, he pulled her onto his lap, feeling the softness of her body against his. Their eyes met for a second before their lips finally touched, and the kiss came intense, full of a desire that had been waiting to be unleashed. William's hands slid down her waist, tracing a slow and possessive path. Ashley, in turn, surrendered to the moment, her senses overwhelmed by the tension and the growing heat. Without thinking too much, her fingers moved downward, exploring with curiosity and desire. The palm of her hand gently rested over his pants, feeling the heat and the hardness forming there, an immediate response to her bold touch. The air around them felt heavy, every breath deeper, heavier. William tightened his grip on her waist, his lips traveling down her exposed neck, his warm breath leaving shivers in its wake. Ashley closed her eyes, indulging in the addictive sensation of the moment. William quickly removed my blouse and began kissing my breasts. I asked him to touch me, and he didn't hesitate. With firm hands, he slid his touch in every direction, feeling every inch of me. He knew exactly what he was doing, and I wanted to experience that pleasure. For a long time, he stayed there, feeling everything with his hands, noticing that I was wetter than when I arrived in the rain. He saw that it was time to introduce his tool, and with it in hand, I kissed it all over. It was an incredible moment. I was surprised by his virility. I never imagined it could be this good. I was in ecstasy, and seeing that he was also eager to move forward, I went on top so he wouldn't have to put too much effort into it. Everything fit perfectly, but he wanted more and asked me to turn around and take it from behind. I must confess, I wasn't really into it, but after that day, I became addicted. In the heat of the moment, he said he was about to release everything, and I told him he didn't need to pull out, to just leave it inside. And so he did. We stayed there for a while, and later we went to take a shower. After all, I still had to help him with his tasks. After that day, I kept working there for a while, fulfilling my daily routine. Of course, making sure to give him his medication on time and doing plenty of physiotherapy sessions. Over time, William recovered well from his surgery until my work there finally came to an end. When I finished, I looked back and realized that even though it had been completely out of the ordinary, I didn't regret a thing. It was intense and pleasurable. And so I continued my life as usual, hoping for another Mr. William to cross my path. And that's it for today. But if you click on the video above, you'll find more stories like this one. Don't forget to give it a like to support the channel, comment your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.